What would happen if you let an emotionless man teach your daughter magic so you wouldn't be disappointed? In the middle of the night, he drags your daughter to the forest near your house, and then chases her until she's breathless, so she won't be hacked to death by that madman. She used all the knowledge from her 14 years of life to flee. No matter how arrogant she usually was, in the end, she was still just a 14-year-old lady who had never experienced the world. Looking at the other's fearful and desperate expression, Derek just calmly closed in, then deliberately widened the distance, because for someone like him who had experienced life and death, he knew well. Only when cornered will the prey dare to bite back at the hunter. Actually, the story must begin in the past. After gaining consciousness, Derek followed an old beggar to learn magic. Although he was just a lowly one-star mage, his habit of boosting was so bad that he called himself a great mage wherever he went. But because he needed knowledge to survive, Derek accepted becoming his servant despite the old man's difficult personality. And not long after, he was able to grasp the flow of mana, something that could take a normal mage 2 to 3 years to awaken. The old man on the side was also a bit astonished when he saw this sight. Suddenly Derek's eyes flew open, his pupils slightly constricted. He clenched his teeth, channeling all his magic into his hand. That source of power shot out and formed an arrow that flew straight ahead. The arrow struck a tree directly and created a horizontal gash on its trunk. The master and apprentice silently watched the arrow embedded in the tree trunk before them. Seeing this, the old man was so horrified that he broke out in a cold sweat. And so I served the old man in every way. Although Derek's face was covered in sweat, his eyes were shining brightly, and he became a 1-star mage within just 1 year. A flickering fire appeared next to a simple hut under the silent night sky. The old man was now dead drunk, holding a bottle of wine. His face tilted up to the sky as he said, "Those noble young masters beyond the northern walls of Ebelstein. Some of them even reached 3 stars before their coming-of-age ceremony." Derek sat beside him, chewing on bread while listening to him say, "That is a realm that someone of lowly blood like you might not reach, even if you trained your entire life. So don't get complacent. Your petty talent will just crumble before the 2-star wall." That old man was always rambling on about bloodlines. Derek silently looked at the bread in his hand. Beside him was the old man's jarring voice. "Magic is the privilege of bloodlines. It's useless no matter how much you struggle." He kept nagging me about the insurmountable wall between nobles and commoners. I lowered my head, lost in thought, while the old man beside me slept soundly. Perhaps it was a longing for things he himself could never achieve. Derek quietly turned his head and glanced at the old man's back. That night was endlessly long. A heavy rain suddenly poured from the night sky, and the next day, upon returning to their dwelling, Derek stood silently looking at the old man's corpse on the ground. I saw that he was dead. His expression was as calm as if nothing had happened, not showing a hint of sorrow. His body was covered in bruises, looking like he had just been beaten up somewhere. I just thought he must have started trouble somewhere and gotten beaten up. Derek diligently dug spadeful after spadeful of earth in the rainy night, and it wasn't until much later that I learned, as he struggled to drag the old man's corpse away, that the old man was beaten to death by the guards. Derek stood in the rain before the old man's simple grave, his expression darkening slightly. It was said he was caught red-handed trying to steal a 2-star magic book from the warehouse. He suddenly squeezed his eyes shut. No one understood why an old man with no ambition would do such a thing. No one knew the reason. A system notification board suddenly appeared before Derek's eyes. That boastful old man always prized bloodlines. He stared intently at the words appearing on the system board. But unfortunately, I could never have noble blood. The content of the notification: basic magic has been mastered. Please choose a main magic specialization. This choice cannot be changed. Because from the very beginning, I wasn't from this world. 4 years passed just like that. The village retained the same ancient and solemn appearance it had 4 years ago. A woman with a confident posture and expression appeared, Katya Framehart. A red flag fluttered in the wind. The former mistress of the fallen Viscount Framehart family. Of noble birth, she was a 3-star mage, and many mercenary guilds wanted to recruit Katya. Derek recalled the scene when he first met her. She had stayed in Ebelstein and taken commissions from the Budden Mercenary Guild, while also teaching me, who had joined the guild as a child and only knew 1-star magic. She taught him many things. I learned a great deal from a 3-star mage like Kat. Scene change: a tavern appears, the Belladon's Tier Tavern. Katya sat across from Derek, teaching him. As a mage, it's natural to desire advancement. Besides, Derek, as you know, you have the talent for it, she told him seriously. But too much ambition will only slow your progress. Hearing this, Derek just calmly nodded and replied, "Yes, I will take it to heart." Katya looked straight at him and ordered, "Now, close your eyes and feel the mana." While Derek was concentrating on feeling his mana, Kadia continued to guide him from the side to calmly feel where the mana originates, how it flows, and think of yourself using mana to realize the image in your imagination. She crossed her arms, watching Direk on the opposite side, who was completely focused on feeling the mana. Although she showed no expression on her face, she was a little surprised inside. Indeed, the amount of innate mana in the boy's body is huge. Perhaps due to his extensive combat experience, his ability to wield mana is also very stable. Direk, who was concentrating on feeling the mana, suddenly snapped his eyes wide open. Kadia's expression couldn't hide the alarm in her eyes either. A loud noise erupted in the tavern. The other patrons, hearing the loud noise, shouted irritably, "What was that? What's that sound? What's going on?" Direk panted, staring at his palms, ignoring the noise outside. "An ambush, go check it out." A hand suddenly grabbed his and pulled him away. "Master." Kadia hurried ahead of Direk, saying without turning back, "Direk, don't say anything. Follow me." Everyone stood up, weapons at the ready, without paying any attention to the two's appearance. "What is it?" There was clearly an explosion. Search carefully, it was definitely an explosion. Kadia led Direk into a small hidden corner. Looking at her tall back in front of him, he cautiously called out, "Master." Katja turned her head slightly to look at him, and instructed seriously, "Direk, listen carefully to what I'm about to say." Hearing this, Direk felt a little worried inside. Yes. Kadia leaned closer to Direk and said seriously, "As you know, nobles are very sensitive about their privileges, and magic is the greatest of them all." Her eyes looked straight at him. "Innate power is considered a gift, but it's limited to the nobility. Among commoners, there are occasional individuals who reach 3 stars. Looking straight at the young man before her, Kadia said seriously, "But most of them are people who have dedicated their lives to studying magic. As for what you just used," then she said something that left Direk stunned, "is a 3-star chaos-type magic called Illusion City. And just like that, I became a 2-star mage at the age of 14. The system board appeared again, can now access 2-star magic. Learn 2-star magic Illusion City." Direk and Kadia sat silently facing each other in the carriage. After that, Kadia continued to guide me, teaching me all sorts of magic, sometimes telling me about the high society she once belonged to. Kadia, now dressed in beautiful attire, stood opposite Direk. A year passed and Kadia left. 2 mysterious figures appeared. It said the family of Count Elv invited her to be a private tutor. The family of Count Elv is where the border count of El Paso resides, a power so great that even the Grand Duke in the capital wouldn't dare to provoke them lightly. He silently watched her sitting in the carriage with her head bowed. For Kadia, it was an offer she couldn't refuse. Through the carriage window, Kadia just gave a sad, faint smile and raised her hand to wave goodbye. To become a magic teacher for a noble family of that stature was a great fortune for anyone. Before she left, Kadia gave me a 2-star magic book as a gift. The system notification appeared again. List of learned magic: 1-star mana arrow, 1-star electric discharge, 2-star fireball. Alteration magic: 1-star create light. Magic: 1-star soundproof, 2-star illusion city. Summoning magic: 1-star summon guiding spirit. Scouting magic: 1-star sense direction, 2-star clairvoyance. Direk sat alone in his room and snapped the book shut. Another year passed. He left the book lying forlornly on the bed and coolly turned to leave the room. I learned 2 more 2-star spells on my own. Direk's face was emotionless, his gaze as sharp as a knife. At only 16 years old. And I have no intention of stopping here. At the Belladon's Tier Tavern. A voice called out from within, "Well now, Direk, it's been a while since we got a proper commission." Direk sat alone at the bar, facing Jaden, and asked, "What kind of commission is it?" Jaden cheerfully extended his hand and replied, "It's a commission from Grand Duke Duplain." "Do you have any idea what this means?" With his characteristic cold face, Direk glanced expressionlessly at him. "Duplain, you say? The Duplain family? Why would a place like that come to us?" Hearing this, Jaden's whole body suddenly lit up with excitement, his eyes shining with the thought of money. "Hey, you brat, does that even matter right now? It's Duplain. Duplain, the place that spends gold like water." He excitedly grabbed Direk by the collar and pulled him close. "Besides, kid, if this goes well, if we can open a line with Duplain, we'll be set for business later on." He brushed off the spot on his shirt that had been grabbed and asked, "So, what do they want us to do?" Jaden took out 2 gold coins and said happily, "It's nothing big. They want to hire us to subjugate some magical beasts on the outskirts of the Grand Duke's territory." Direk was skeptical upon hearing this. "Is that all?" Jaden quickly replied, "That's it. Those nobles never go back on their word." Hearing that, he rubbed his chin thoughtfully. "It sounds shady. A family of Duplain's stature hiring mercenaries to kill magical beasts." Thinking this, Direk turned to leave. "I'm not doing it. Give it to someone else." Seeing him leave, Jaden was extremely alarmed. "Hey Direk, wait a minute." Direk turned his head back and coldly left him with a sentence, "Just call someone else. You know I don't take shady jobs." Hearing this, Jaden got annoyed. "This brat, then he'll do it. But they need a mage, they need a mage. Do you know how rare mages are in the guild these days? He put a hand on his hip and said loudly, without you no one can do it. That's why I called you. Durek, still with an unconcerned expression, walked away. What, you need to bring a mage along just to catch a few magical beasts? Anyway, I don't want to get involved in trouble. Suddenly he turned around and caught something in mid-air that Jaden threw to him here. Jaden leaned on the counter and said with a smile, 1 black gold coin. This is just the deposit, not the main fee. Derek opened his palm and stared at the gold coin in his hand. The faces of Dylan, Katerina, and Iselin suddenly appeared. Derek's expression darkened while Jaden cheerfully put an arm around him and said with a laugh, Derek, say hello, these are your clients. Dylan glanced at him and declared, unacceptable. He glanced at Derek and said disdainfully, a brat who hasn't even had his coming-of-age ceremony. I heard he was a hero in the Dawn War, so I had high hopes. I never expected you to send a mere child on this mission. Hearing this, Jaden hastily waved his hands and explained, no, not at all, Mr. Envoy. This kid is the real deal. Has the best mage I know. Dylan ignored Jaden and immediately turned around, ordering, let's go. This is not a mission that can be entrusted to a child. Katerina suddenly whispered something to him. Both of them turned their gazes to the mysterious young lady accompanying them. Derek's face remained emotionless as someone spoke to him. Your name is Derek, right? Let's talk for a bit. In a majestic land, the territory of the Grand Duke Duplain, a monster was taken down by a magic arrow. Derek's eyes were now like those of a predator, cold and brutal. He decisively decapitated a monster with a single swing of his sword. Another monster from behind raised its axe, intending to ambush Derek. He nimbly dodged, causing the monster to miss its strike. Derek coldly reached out and grabbed the monster's neck. He summoned a huge amount of magic to electrocute the monster to death. Tossing the last monster's charred corpse to the ground, Derek coldly turned back and reported, it's all done, Mr. Envoy. The other 3 stood there dumbfounded. Dylan crossed his arms and praised, not bad. The mysterious girl also gave a faint smile as Dylan spoke his next sentence. To handle this many so quickly is truly impressive. Night had fallen. The warm yellow light from inside the tavern stood out vividly. The tavern bell's tears. Dublin was now furious, questioning him. Are you planning to be a hunting dog for the nobles, Derek? Seeing him so angry he was about to jump on the table, Jaden quickly advised Dublin. Get down, what are you doing with customers here? Dublin continued to shout angrily in Derek's face. Even if we're lowly commoners, we shouldn't become dogs for the nobility. Jaden looked at his face, flushed with anger, and said calmly, hasn't Derek told you how much this job pays? Dublin gritted his teeth and asked, How much is it that you'd throw away your pride to grovel for those nobles? Jaden's expression didn't change. Well, it's not like has literally groveling. Then he raised his hand and made a sign. Seeing it, Dublin got even more annoyed. What, 1 silver coin? Jaden just calmly shook his head. Dublin's eyes also lit up with greed when he learned the real price, 1 gold coin. He bowed his head deeply before Jaden and shouted, please let me grovel too. Hearing this, Jaden panicked. This brat, will you shut up already? I told you it's not groveling. The sky outside was now completely dark. Dublin was now slumped over the table, asleep and drooling. A voice suddenly spoke up, so, how was the commission? Derek calmly held his cup of wine and replied, nothing special. Just exterminated a few goblins and it was done. Hearing that, Jaden added, the first impression was a bit bad. But they look like they have a lot of money, don't they? Derek lowered his eyes, his face pensive as he said, that's true. But all 3 of them were lying. Jaden turned around, looking for something as he asked, really? Derek looked down and answered him. Envoys from noble families usually possess 3 qualities: youth, physical strength, and diplomacy. They look for those things, but that man had none. As for the woman who called herself a scullery maid, he recalled the scene of the woman handing him a towel. Her hands were too clean for someone who does hard labor. Thinking of this, Derek added, and as for the girl who was supposedly an apprentice, a voice cut him off. Derek looked up at the person who had just spoken. Jaden looked at him seriously. We are mercenaries. We don't need to dig too deep into our clients. Just do the job you're given and get paid. That's enough. Hearing that, Derek just coldly replied, yes. Jaden looked at the 2 kids with a gentle gaze. What Uncle Jaden said is right, this is the wild. And in the wild, food and clothing are the most important things. Nothing else matters. The next day, a vast territory came into view, the domain of the Grand Duke Duplain. Derek turned and sheathed his sword, then calmly said to everyone, it's all cleaned up. With this, the goblins won't dare come near for a while. Dylan praised him, well done. You've worked hard. Hearing that, Jaden cheerfully said, all right, so how will the remaining payment be settled? 2 shiny gold coins were held up high. Jaden took the 2 gold coins and cheerfully ruffled Derek's hair, much to his annoyance. Derek, look, 2 gold coins, a whole 2 coins with this much. Derek was speechless. Uncle, put them down and talk properly. Old Dylon suddenly coughed to get their attention. Then he frowned. Although he looked somewhat displeased, he still said, Derek, I highly value your skills. I'd like to offer you a new commission. What do you think? Hearing this, both of them looked up at him in surprise. Dylon continued, the Grand Duke's estate will pay 15 black gold coins for this commission. Jaden was shocked at 15 coins. Dylon looked straight at Derek and asked, will you do it? Derek answered seriously yes. The carriage carrying everyone gradually moved into the distance. The carriage finally reached its destination. A magnificent palace came into view. The Duplain estate. Jaden stepped down, looked up, and exclaimed, is this the family of the Grand Duke Duplain? It's truly spectacular. Dylon spoke to the two of them, before we go inside, allow me to reintroduce myself. Hearing that, Jaden cheerfully replied, yes, oh my, we've been together all day. Please, go ahead, sir. Dylon looked at them both seriously and introduced himself. I am Dylon, the head butler of the Grand Duke Duplain's estate. I apologize, but due to the nature of my work, I had to conceal my identity. After hearing this, Jaden became a bit flustered. Yes, oh my, well then. The woman also spoke gracefully. I am Katerina, the head maid of the Grand Duke's estate. Jaden hastily bowed to them. Oh my, for such prominent figures to how rude of me. I am Jaden, leader of the Belden Mercenary Guild. Derek stood to the side, saying nothing, only thinking coldly, not an envoy but the head butler. Not a scullery maid but the head maid. I guessed they were important, but their status is much higher than I expected. A pair of feet stepped down from the carriage. Both of them turned to look. Jaden spoke up curiously then. That person is... The mysterious girl had now removed her hood. Her long hair fluttered in the wind. Seeing her, Derek was a bit stunned. The mysterious girl smiled brightly at everyone and introduced herself. I am Iselin Eleanor Duplain. I wish to invite you, Derek, to be the magic tutor for my younger sister Dyla. Iselin Eleanor Duplain, the eldest daughter of the Duplain family. Derek glanced at her with some concern. A magic tutor for a noble lady. A large palace bustling with servants came into view. The Duplain ducal residence. The door to a room was suddenly thrown open from the outside. An aggressive figure strode in, saying as he walked, Brother Valerian, please take a look at this. Duplain, who was reviewing documents, looked up and glared unhappily at his son Reg. What is the meaning of this? Conduct yourself in a manner befitting your station. Reg stood next to a sobbing maid and said loudly, the one who needs to maintain her station isn't me, but Dyla. Time and again, she's laid her hands on even my servants. The maid's face was soaked in tears. Valerian turned his head and looked at his younger brother, Reg, annoyed. Lower your voice, father and I are talking. Reg, still angry, he accused last month more than 10 servants quit. Every few days, she smashes things. He walked up to Duplain and slammed his hand on the desk angrily. When will you finally discipline that disobedient child, father? Valerian, now furious at his brother's attitude, shot up from his seat and yelled Reg. He frowned, his tone suppressive. That's enough. Stop it and get out. Reg said nothing. Just turned to look at his brother with a dark expression. The figures of two girls suddenly appeared. Father, even if Diala is unruly, we still have Iselin, don't we? Reg frowned with a dark expression and gave his opinion. I think we should give up on Diala. Duplain took off his glasses and said calmly, this is not your concern, Reg. Reg said angrily, I've had the butler look into a few convents. They have good facilities and are frequented by many nobles. It's better to let her serve God than to live as a thorn in everyone's side, isn't it? If this continues, it will only bring disaster upon us. Hearing this, Duplain's face darkened as he grabbed his son's head. Then he forcefully slammed his head down onto the desk. Duplain's voice carried an indescribable anger, his eyes as cold as daggers as he said, I told you, this is not your concern, Reg. As his head was slammed down, Reg gritted his teeth, refusing to submit. It's time for you to be decisive, father. Duplain's gaze towards him carried a hint of displeasure. Iselin cheerfully led the way for Derek. Then she suddenly turned her head and asked him, my younger sister, Dyla, have you ever heard of her? Hearing this, Derek tried to search his memory and replied, the young lady Dyla, I've seen her name in the Duplain family tree. Hearing this, Iselin lowered her head sadly and helplessly, saying, yes, that's right. Perhaps few people in the outside world know about her. The door to the room opened once again. Seeing the two men in front of her, Iselin quickly spoke up, brother. Valerian looked at her gently and said, Iselin, it's been a long time, hasn't it? Are you doing well in Ebelstein? Hearing this, she nodded lightly. Yes, thanks to your concern, I'm living very comfortably. Valerian tried to hurry the annoyed Reg along, while awkwardly smiling and waving at the two of them. Is that so? As you can see, Reg is slightly injured. We'll talk later. Iselin just replied gently, yes, brother. Derek's sharp, cold gaze fell upon the two of them. The two of them, Reg, over there, a maid was covering her face, crying her eyes out. Seeing this, Derek remained silent and said nothing. She and he sat seriously in the study. Duplain spoke calmly, it's good that you're living well in Ebelstein. Iselin turned her head to look directly at him and gave a bright smile. Yes, thanks to your thoughtful arrangements, father. This is the magic tutor from Ebelstein. He has agreed to teach Diala. With his eyes still glued to the pile of documents, Duplain replied, all right. Iselin and Derek stood up. She smiled at Duplain and said, then, I'll take my leave. As the two were about to turn and leave, Duplain calmly ordered, you, stay behind. Hearing this, Derek just calmly turned his head to look at him. Sunlight streamed into the gloomy room through the crack in the door. The documents were still being written on without pause. Duplain asked while reviewing the documents, you look so young, 16 years old. He looked at him and politely replied, yes. He asked again, how much magic do you know? Derek answered, honestly, I can use a little bit of first-level magic. Duplain took off his glasses. He looked straight at Derek and said seriously, don't be overly modest. Humility is not always a virtue. He said nothing, just silently looked at Duke Duplain. In Derek's eyes, Duke Duplain was now exuding a terrifying aura. Politeness is indeed useless before a fifth-level mage. Derek bowed his head and said to him, if I was disrespectful, I apologize. Duplain heard this and said, it's all right. I understand why you have to hide your skills. Excessive talent can sometimes consume its owner. He pushed up his glasses. Judging by your age and attire, you don't look like a magic tutor at all. Derek gave a serious slight nod. I am a mercenary. Duplain looked at him and said, since Iselin chose you, I have no objections. I will permit you to enter and exit Dila's annex villa. Then he stood up and added, a maid will show you the way. I'm leaving now. Hearing this, Derek quickly spoke up, may I ask one thing? Duplain calmly agreed, go ahead. Hearing his agreement, Derek said, sir, I am a mercenary. A job, once accepted, must be completed. Iselin hired me. He looked at the Duke and added, to teach Dila magic and help her integrate into noble society. Duplain frowned unhappily. Why state the obvious? Derek looked him straight in the eye. For that reason, there is one thing I wish to ask of you. Duplain looked at him, full of questions. A plate came flying through the air. It smashed against the wall and shattered, causing the nearby maid to scream in terror. She quickly bowed low, hastily saying, I'm so sorry, Lady Dila. The person opposite her heard this and said arrogantly, sorry. Do you think an apology from someone like you has any value? Then she suddenly gave an order that made the maid's face turn pale with fear. Get out of my sight immediately. If you dare show your face again, I'll throw it right at that pathetic face of yours. Cup of steaming hot tea appeared, but why was it Derek? Jaden sat opposite Iselin and asked aloud, the Duplain family should have plenty of magic tutors. Right, besides, it's not easy for a commoner to teach magic to a noble. She lowered her face and replied to him. Almost all the famous mages on the continent have been invited, but everyone gave up. I was so desperate that I just needed to find anyone who could use magic. Then Iselin raised her face to look directly at Jaden and said, Derek is a mercenary, but he also understands noble culture. Hearing this, Jaden also looked at her and replied, perhaps it's because his master was once a noble, so he taught him all sorts of things. Hearing this, Iselin seemed to have a realization. I see. Compared to an ordinary mercenary, he does have a certain air about him. I think Derek can straighten Della out. Jaden suddenly said, Lady Iselin, you need to learn to be a better judge of character. Hearing this, Iselin was surprised. What? He looked at her seriously and said, Derek is a street mage who has been a mercenary since childhood. Do you think someone like that survives on air and kindness? Iselin was somewhat surprised but said nothing. Derek was led by Delon and a maid. He stood alone before the large door. Derek's hand suddenly rose into the air. He raised his hand and knocked lightly on the door. Derek looked at the door before him, said nothing. He reached out and turned the doorknob in front of him. Opening the door, Derek said calmly, hello. Looking at the lonely back of the young lady before him, he said cautiously, I am Derek. Excuse me. The young lady just gave a soft command, come here. Dila Catherine Duplain of the House Duplain. Derek slowly approached the young lady. The corners of her mouth suddenly turned up into a smirk. A glass of water was splashed accurately right in his face. Derek's face was now soaked with tea. Dila stood there arrogantly taunting him. Oh dear, what should I do? I thought a sewer rat had crawled into the house. She approached him with amusement, her tone full of sarcasm. Isn't this the mercenary the butler mentioned? Or rather, on second thought, you really are a rat. One of her hands rested on the chair. One of her feet followed, resting on it as well. Dila picked up a bucket of dirty water and stood on the chair, pouring it all over Derek's head. What's wrong? Does the smell of sewage make you homesick? That sewer, stinking outfit really suits you. Derek remained silent, no matter how much she insulted him. Dila stood on the chair and said in a regretful tone, I'm out of water. What a shame. Derek said nothing, simply looking up and glancing at her coldly. Seeing this, Dila frowned in annoyance. She angrily kicked him straight in the chest. How dare you look at me like that? Derek was kicked and stumbled back. She stood arrogantly with her hands on her hips, watching his struggling form. She suddenly raised a hand to take off her shoe. Damn it. Dyla held the shoe up high and pinched her nose in disgust. What a filthy stench. Then she threw the shoe hard at Derek. Dyla gracefully sat down on the nearby chair. She looked down on him haughtily and said, "Hey, sewer rat. Know your place. You dare to teach me? Didn't the streets teach you any basic manners?" On a desk in the study, Duke Duplain was quietly looking at the scene outside the window. His face was colored with contemplation. He recalled their conversation from earlier, when Derek had said, "My presence here means that Lady Dyla's problem is not easy to solve. So I want to ask you, who loves Dyla with all your heart?" He gave him a cold glance. "Do you permit me to use any means necessary to teach the young lady?" Hearing this, he became lost in thought and did not answer. A sudden hard slap landed on Dyla's face, making it flush red and leaving her stunned. Derek rotated his wrist while Dyla was still stunned from the slap. She looked up in terror at the menacing figure before her. Then, stunned, she raised a hand to touch her slapped cheek, saying nothing. Derek's eyes, full of killing intent, looked at Dyla 3 years ago. Derek and Katia sat leisurely in a carriage. While wiping his sword, Derek said, "Master, if you had to teach a defiant and ungrateful disciple, what would you do?" Katia stroked her chin and said, "That's a difficult one. Perhaps I would try to understand, be patient with, and embrace them." Hearing that, he was a little displeased. "Isn't that too idealistic? What if even that is not possible with that disciple?" Hearing this, Katie explained the essence of education is to guide a disciple to a better path. If you cannot communicate through understanding and patience, then you must find a different starting point. Derek heard this and asked, "A different starting point? What is that?" Katia's face darkened as she glanced at him. In grave fear into them. Having been slapped, Dyla held her face in astonishment. Derek crossed his arms, looked at her, and said, "Treat others with consideration and respect. I won't repeat myself a second time. Snap out of it." Dyla pushed herself up. She ruthlessly slapped him hard across the face. Dyla scowled at him. "A thing like you, how dare you dare." Another harsh slap landed on her face. Derek glanced over with a grim expression. "I won't repeat myself. When you deal with others, you must show consideration and respect." Dyla's expression gradually turned frantic. She shot up and screamed, "Butler, what are you all doing? This bastard just hit your Lady Dyla." Hearing Dyla's scream, Dylon rushed in with the servants in a panic. "Lady Dyla, are you all right?" He walked up to Derek and rebuked him loudly. "What do you think you're doing? You dare lay a hand on the young lady. If the Grand Duke finds out about this." He said nothing and just pulled a scroll from inside his coat. Holding the letter up, Derek said coldly, "Grand Duke Duland has given me full authority. Complete authority over Lady Dyla's education. No matter what methods I use, please remember that he has permitted this." Dylon took the paper and put on his glasses to inspect it. "This is..." Dyla watched him read, tense. Night completely enveloped the sky above the castle. Re-ee-ee. Derek just looked up at him coldly. Valerian angrily grabbed Derek's collar, about to strike him. "You dare hit Dyla?" Reg hurriedly stopped him. "Brother, put it down and let's talk." Derek just looked back coldly. "This is what his grace permitted." Reg quickly stood between them. "Brother, he is a guest that Isolin invited. If you do this, you'll put Isolin in a difficult position. Besides, Father has already agreed." He angrily turned to leave. "You follow me." "Reg, don't get in my way. Mind your own business." Reg smiled placatingly and put a hand on his shoulder. "I've already heard about it." Dyla needed to be knocked around a bit to come to her senses. "Don't worry, he won't go too far." Derek turned his head to look. Reg watched their departing backs and remarked, "Why does he keep clinging to that useless girl?" A slightly open door illuminated part of a doll's face. Valerian opened the door to a room and said to him, "Come in." He explained as he walked, "This is the room Dyla used when she was in the main residence. Now it's just left abandoned like this." Derek's gaze fell upon a painting in the room. Valerian's gaze also softened as he looked at the painting. "Dyla loved to draw. Every time she showed me her work, she would blush. It was so adorable." Looking at the painting before them, he added, "But she rarely finished any of them. She'd usually just draw the part she liked, and then abandon it." Valerian suddenly apologized. "I was too emotional earlier. I'm sorry." Derek turned to him and replied, "It's all right, Your Highness, don't worry about it." Looking at the room full of paintings, he asked, "But why did you bring me to this room?" Valerian answered sadly, "I wanted to show you that Dyla isn't a child who deserves to be abandoned or beaten. But one day, she started to become overly obsessed with her noble blood." Derek listened in silence as he continued. "And in the end, she was driven from the main residence and confined to the annex. I just can't understand what changed her so much." He reached out and took a book from the shelf. "I have to stop Dyla from being sent to the convent, no matter what. If she can just learn even a single first-tier spell, I can convince Father." Valerian suddenly grabbed both his shoulders. "So please, I'm begging you, save Dyla." He pushed Valerian's hands away. "Wait a minute." Derek flipped through a few pages of the book. So, she hasn't completely given up on magic. Look at all these notes crammed in this book. He turned to ask. The other books are probably all theory and rules, right? Valerian replied. That's right. Nobles usually learn through doctrine. Hearing this, Derek fell into deep thought. A beautiful landscape painting hung on the wall. Derek snapped the book in his hand shut. He handed the book to Valerian and said, "I'll give it a try." The beautiful night sky was visible through the window. Dila was sound asleep on her soft bed. A bucket of water was suddenly dumped on her. Drenched, Dila screamed in alarm. Derek looked at her coldly and said, feeling sleepy now. Dala sat up, grinding her teeth. Are you insane? He didn't answer, simply pulling her along. Please come with me, there's somewhere you need to be. Dila shrieked in anger. Hey, let go, how dare you touch me? Are you really insane? Derek dragged her down the hall as she screamed wildly. It hurts, let go, I'm not going anywhere you people, what are you doing? Stop this bastard. Now, the cool moonlight shone down. Without a word, Derek dragged Dila outside the mansion. Then he coldly threw her to the ground. Dila ground her teeth and cursed. What's this supposed to change? Get real, you lowlife, how dare you presume to teach me? Derek suddenly spoke, startling Dila. Not gonna listen, are you? Then let me tell you an interesting story. He gave a devilish smile and said, the truth is, I have no intention of teaching Dila any magic. I just enjoy beating the crap out of arrogant nobles. Hearing this, Dila's face went pale. Ooh, Derek said, as if it were obvious, doesn't it make sense? Why would a lowly commoner like me need to revere nobles? This whole tutoring and morality thing is just a fancy excuse. Dila trembled. What are you saying? Then that means... He faced her with a wicked smile. I just needed an excuse to smash the arrogant faces of conceited nobles like you. Derek drew his sword and said, do you have any idea how wonderful the screams of those high and mighty nobles sound? Trembling, Dila tried to threaten him. Do you think you'll get away with this scot-free? He raised his sword with a malicious laugh. Of course. You're about to be locked away in a convent anyway. Who would believe someone like you? Dila's face grew paler. If this turns into a big deal, I can just offer up my life to atone for it. A lowlife's life is only worth that much, isn't it? The sword in Derek's hand reflected Dila's terrified face. Or I could just run away, and no one would even remember me. Consider it helping the Duplain house remove a thorn in its side. I'm dead for sure. Dila gritted her teeth and ran. If he catches me, I'm dead for sure. He stood still, watching her figure recede into the distance. If I run across the fields to the mansion, I'll be caught immediately. Dila's face was scratched, but she didn't dare to stop. I have to get into the forest. I know my way around the forest. If I can escape, I can get back to the residence. Dila jumped over a tree root. Then, hell be the one who's dead meat, not me. Dila froze when she glanced behind her. An enormous fireball appeared. Derek raised his hand, controlling the fireball. Dila looked back and gritted her teeth, thinking, a fireball. Staring at the massive fireball in Derek's hand, she was stunned. That's a second-tier spell. How can he use a second-tier spell? The corners of Derek's mouth twitched into a smirk. Another fireball shot through the air. Dila was so frightened she could only stare, frozen in place. She quickly ducked to avoid it. A huge explosion erupted where the fireball landed. Dila's eyes widened in terror, sweat pouring down her face. Derek smirked, his voice laced with regret mist. The full moon cast a pale yellow light over the silent night. The sound of a woman running shattered the silence. Dila ran for her life in a panic, as if terrified by what was behind her. Paying too much attention to what was behind her, she tripped over a dry branch. Dila fell flat on the cold ground. Fortunately, her face was unharmed. Suppressing the pain, she forced herself to get up. Suddenly, a volley of arrows flew toward her. As soon as Dila glanced over, she saw the sharp arrows. She nimbly dodged backward just as the arrows landed, thankfully missing her. Dila collapsed hesitantly, watching it all unfold. Derek approached and praised her. You move pretty well. It's hard to believe someone stuck in the annex all day has skills like that. She gritted her teeth and looked up at him, her eyes filled with rage. Right after, before he could react, Dila scrambled to her feet and ran forward. Derek pursed his lips at her defiant attitude. Meanwhile, she wasn't much better off. Her strength was beginning to fail, but she told herself, how long do I have to run? Can I even escape? If this continues, I'll definitely be caught. She hadn't run far before her attention was drawn behind her again. It was him, bent over and casting a spell. A deep pool of water had appeared on the ground. As Derek teared up, everything returned to how it was before. A storm brewed in his heart. That's right, this is the forest from the painting. It must be where she played as a child. Derek recalled seeing this image in a painting and guessed that, in the vast embrace of nature, she had unconsciously sensed the flow of magical power and channeled it into her art. As he was lost in thought, a sound from behind suddenly shattered the silence that must be. At some point, Dila had returned, holding a heavy rock and aiming for his head. Derek was no pushover either and immediately drew the sword at his side. He deftly knocked the rock away, causing her to fall down. Della gritted her teeth as her plan was foiled. He looked at her coldly, a red glint in his eyes. I commend your spirit. Knowing it wasn't easy to escape my pursuit, you came back to attack. That couldn't have been an easy decision. Della wanted to get up and run, but she couldn't, as if something was holding her down. Derek sneered, reminding her, you don't have the strength to run anymore. He raised his sword, offering Dilla one last grace. Do you have any last words? She seemed to accept her fate and burst out laughing. Della retorted defiantly, what you want me to apologize, just kill me. I'm not a coward like those wretched commoners. A flicker of sadness crossed his face as he asked, why are you so obsessed with your noble blood? Hearing that question, her heart constricted. Dilla's face filled with bitterness for herself. Because, besides that, what else do I have? If you take away this noble blood, I'm completely empty. She clenched her fist and hatefully slammed it into the cold ground. Magic, magic, magic. As she looked up at him, Dilla's eyes were brimming with tears. Do you think I haven't tried? What am I supposed to do when I've tried to death and still failed? For a moment, Derek was rendered speechless. She collapsed to her knees, venting her anger on the cold ground. If I fail at magic, at painting, everything, if I become a complete failure. Dilla's eyes narrowed with resentment. Then besides this blood, what else do I have? If I lose this too, then I'll become. Her words rang out like an accusation. What will I become? Derek pressed his lips together, unable to give her an answer. The sword in his hand began to glow once more. Dilla didn't notice, her eyes now completely filled with tears. Under the bright moonlight, Derek raised his sword and nodded. I've heard you loud and clear. With his own eyes filled with tears, he said his farewell. Goodbye to you. In the blink of an eye, faint patches of light washed over Dilla's figure, carrying her far away. Terrified, Dilla lowered her head and squeezed her eyes shut. She bit her lip, accepting her fate, and slowly opened her eyes to gaze upon the world. Amidst the sharp ice shards, a sword had pierced through, standing proudly. Della looked around in a daze, as if she couldn't yet make sense of things. He was still here, having created a protective circle around where she sat. Dilla stared in bewilderment at her trembling hand, which was emitting a faint aura. Magic, seeing everything was in order, he neatly sheathed his sword at his side. Derek bowed earnestly. You have endured much, my lady. Please forgive my disrespect. Dilla stopped crying and looked up at him with eyes full of hope. Seeing her expression, Derek explained, though this is merely a manifestation of mana, not yet worthy of being called a spell, you did very well. Della was once again driven mad with anger by his words. All her long suppressed emotions finally found an outlet, and she began to cry her heart out. One adult, one child, a single cry, and live in the dark night. The moon, hidden behind the clouds, silently witnessed it all. Derek had her sit on a log and explained, this is the wild school. Dilla asked, puzzled, the wild school. As he bandaged the wound on her leg, he clarified her confusion. Yes, most nobles follow the discipline school. All schools are the same in essence, but their training methods are worlds apart. She listened intently as he explained, Lady Dilla, you belong to the wild school, but were forced to learn the theories of the discipline school. That's where the problem lies. It's not that you're wearing the wrong clothes, you're trying to squeeze into a suit that's far too tight. His words sounded believable, but Dilla was skeptical. How do you know? How did you realize I belong to the wild school? Derek recalled the paintings had seen before and surmised, I've seen your paintings, my lady. You feel the mana floating in nature and capture it on canvas. He kept his head down, still focused on his work, not paying much mind to her stare. Mages naturally born to the wild school can often sense the mana in nature from a young age. Dilla's mood had calmed down a bit, she was no longer a crybaby. After finishing, Derek dusted off her clothes and helped her up. Alright, you can walk now. Dilla felt more at ease. Not bad, at this rate. Derek walked a few steps ahead of her. Even though you've manifested mana, you still have a long way to go. Tomorrow, I will teach you how to wield it naturally. Just as he was about to walk on, she finally dared to speak his name. Derek. Too embarrassed, Dilla turned her face away and said nonchalantly, thank you. He didn't refuse or offer any reply. Finally he called out to her, let's go. Dilla happily drew near. Okay, let's go. The two of them chatted harmoniously under the moonlight, one asking and the other answering. By the way, did you paint that sunset picture yourself? I don't remember. It's been a long time since I've held a brush. It's a perfect piece. That's the masterpiece of my life. You're the first person to recognize its value. The next day, brilliant sunlight shone through the window. Dilla stared in a daze at the mana manifesting on her hands. The streams of light flickered with a wondrous magic. Her eyes were full of concentration, giving it her complete attention. Suddenly, plumes of gray-black smoke appeared instead, making Dilla anxious. This isn't good. Outside, maids were passing by the door to her room. Suddenly, Dilla flung the door open, startling a maid. The bucket of water in her hands wobbled. Due to inertia, water splashed everywhere, soaking her dress. The maid apologized profusely. Lady Della, I'm sorry, I'm so sorry. Della shot her a murderous glare. The maid hurriedly knelt and bowed her head to the floor. Please spare me, I deserve death, please forgive me just this once. But instead, Della just calmly advised her, be careful next time. This left the maid bewildered. What's going on? Why didn't she hit me? She just said that and walked away. The other maids saw this, gathered around to help, and started gossiping. Are you alright? Did she hit you? No, her ladyship just said that and left. I wonder what happened when she went out last night. Meanwhile, in his room, Direk was still sound asleep. Della rushed over and banged loudly on his door, calling for him. Direx. Rubbing his eyes, a tired Direx opened the door. What is... The butler arrived and tried to calm her down. My lady, you should mind your manners. This is not appropriate. Della ignored him and spoke only to Direk. Teach me how to control my newly awakened mana. I already tried by myself and it didn't work. Hearing this, the butler was shocked. She has awakened her mana. When Direk didn't answer, she urged him, you promised you would teach me today. Hurry up. He suddenly slammed the door in her face, leaving only a single sentence behind. Please come back this afternoon. Della just smiled without a trace of anger, which made the butler weep with joy. Finally, her ladyship has... Sure enough, her temper hadn't changed. A second later, she was pounding on the door again. Hey, who are you to give me orders? Open up, I said, teach me right now. The pounding continued outside, but he calmly ignored it and went back to sleep. Hey, open the door. Della let out an angry remark. Scene change at the palace the next morning. Egg slowly walked down the hallway. Two maids cleaning nearby exchanged gossipy looks. Have you heard? Lady Della hasn't broken a single plate in days. The other maid nodded, exclaiming, it's true, I spilled water this morning and didn't even get scalded. The blonde maid covered her mouth and whispered, that's not all, I heard Lady Della has awakened her mana. The other gasped in amazement, oh my goodness, really? Just then, Reg happened to be walking by, and he stopped in his track. Reg turned his head, glaring at them coldly. What did you just say? Scene change. Inside the study, the sound of a pen scratching rings out. Duke Duplain spoke hesitantly. Della has awakened her mana. Valerian looked at him and replied, yes, father. I've confirmed it with the butler and the maids several times. He didn't show much emotion, only replying softly, how fortunate. Reg then looked at him with a serious expression. Don't celebrate just because she's awakened her mana, father. Hearing that tone, Valerian couldn't help but shout, hey, your own sister awakens her mana. And instead of congratulating her, you... Duke Duplain frowned slightly. Reg ignored him and continued speaking to his father. Do you remember all the trouble she's caused? Are we really going to forget about sending her to the convent over one minor achievement? The Duke lowered his eyes, looking thoughtful, but did not reply. Scene change. The weather seems very nice today. Della sat on her bed, puffing out her cheeks. Direk stood with his hands on his hips and looked at her. Are you kidding me? Della turned her back to him, saying petulantly, I'm not kidding, I'm furious. Direk looked awkward and scratched his head. It's no use, no matter how angry you get. Della immediately retorted, I'm not angry, I'm furious. He looked down and advised, pouting like this won't solve anything. Everything has its own process. Finally, she couldn't hold back anymore, raising a fist and snapping, it's not pouting, it's anger. Direk paused, pursing his lips in thought. Della was the one who couldn't stand it and turned away first. She hesitated, just consider it pouting then. Direk walked over and pulled out a chair. He sat down, his emotionless eyes glancing at Della. Awakening your magic doesn't give you permission to be aggressive or you'll burn out immediately. I'm speaking from my own experience. Studying is important, but so is resting. You've rested enough, now it's time to study. She pouted with a sarcastic tone, yes, whatever you say is right, teacher. The old-fashioned magic teacher is here, yes. Direk's eyes suddenly turned grim. He looked at her and said in a cold voice, so, do you want me to teach in a way that isn't old-fashioned? Unpleasant memories of him flashed through Dila's mind. She sat down on the chair, lifted her chin and said, never mind. Direk began the lesson. He looked at her hands and said, today, we will practice controlling your magic. Once you master this ability, young lady, you can quickly master level 1 magic. The wild school isn't bound by a system, making it very suitable for self-study. It values freedom much more than the discipline school. Honestly, young lady, you're a great fit for the wild school. Hearing his praise, Dila stammered in response, what are you talking about? Direk looked at her seriously and said, it's as I said. Your free-spirited personality is a perfect match for the wild school. Moreover, with Duplain blood, you have abundant talent. One of her ears perked up, catching every word. Dila blushed slightly and hesitated, I have talent. He lowered his eyes and replied, that's right. Creating an ice wall upon awakening your magic is clearly an innate talent. She fiddled with her fingers and asked as if by chance, so, am I a genius? Direk immediately refuted, talent and genius are two different things. Dila pouted, what, they're almost the same. He replied, no, they're completely different. Diala didn't bother arguing anymore and sighed, "Oh please, you're so smart. You win." At that moment, Reg was standing outside the room, having heard the entire conversation. He gritted his teeth and let out a cold snort. Time passed in the palace. Diala burst open the door and said excitedly, "Derek, I've awakened my magic, but I can't control it." A few days later, she ran up to him again, boasting, "Derek, look, I can use ice, but it feels weird." Time passed again. Diala chased after him in the hallway, shouting, "Derek, I can feel my magic, but this thing is so confusing." Another late afternoon under a tree. "Derek, what are you doing here?" Diala stood with her hands on her hips, questioning him. "You're supposed to be near the annex. Did you think I lent you the magic book for you to study?" Derek nonchalantly replied, "Well, yes, it was for study." Without another word, Diala grabbed his wrist and pulled him along. "Hey, what about this? Like you said before, I've succeeded in releasing my magic. Hurry up and take a look." Inside Valerian's study, the door swung open. Derek walked in. "You called for me, my lord?" Valerian nodded and gestured, "Ah, you're here, sit down, let's talk." He didn't beat around the bush and asked directly, "How has Diala been lately?" Derek looked down and replied nonchalantly, "She's made significant progress, but it will still take more time for her to master level 1 magic." Valerian nodded in reply, "I see. Mother will probably be back next week after her social gathering. I'm telling you in advance, she's not an easy person. Everyone in the mansion is fine for now, but fundamentally, nobles dislike commoners holding important positions. Do you understand?" Derek looked straight into Valerian's eyes and replied, "I'll keep that in mind." "Did you call me here just to tell me this?" He suddenly pursed his lips in silence. Valerian stood up, walked to the window, and said slowly, "I am the heir to the Duplain family. The position of family head means I must embrace and protect every member of the family. To do that, I need to treat everyone with sincerity. But it's so difficult. The human heart is deep and complex. I wish everyone shared the same thoughts and values, but that's not the reality." Derek looked at his back and asked frankly, "So what are you trying to say?" Valerian's fist clenched tightly. The moment he turned around, tears were welling in his eyes. "Diala won't play with me anymore, Derek." Hearing this, Derek's face darkened as he glanced at Valerian. He began to lament. "When she was little, she always laughed and played with me. That image is still etched in my heart. Is there any other angelic child like that in this world? Derek, do you have any ideas? A way to win back Diala's affection?" Derek slowly took a sip of tea and spoke, "Why are you asking me about this?" Without hesitation, Valerian replied, "Because Diala only ever hangs around you." As soon as he finished speaking, Diala's voice rang out, "Derek, where are you?" Valerian suddenly took something out and presented it. "It's nothing, look at this. I learned how to make dolls from the maids." In his hand was an absolutely hideous doll. Valerian proudly boasted, "See, it looks just like Diala, doesn't it? Can you feel this big brother's love?" Derek's face darkened as he looked at him and said bluntly, "Are you trying to curse her?" Valerian pursed his lips, tears welling up again. "Derek, you really don't understand these things at all." Time passed again. On a beautiful day at the palace, that woman had arrived. She looked at Derek and spoke, "I've heard a lot about you. They said they found an extremely talented magic tutor. It's a pleasure to meet you. I am Amelia Deville Duplain. If you don't mind, I'd like to send a small gift to your domain." He replied bluntly without any hesitation, "I don't belong to any noble house." She was slightly taken aback. He continued, "I am a commoner." Malaya's eyes widened in shock. "A commoner?" Time flashes back to 1 week ago. Isolin bowed her head and said to Derek, "I feel so fortunate to have brought you to the mansion." She smiled, her eyes crinkling. "As her older sister, I want to be with Diala more, but I have many things to handle in Ebelstein, so I'm entrusting her to you." Derek replied without looking up, "Yes, I understand." Jaden clapped him on the shoulder from behind. "Derek, our young lady is entrusting her to you with such faith, and you reply so bluntly." As the two of them got into the carriage, they looked out at him. Jaden smiled and reminded him, "Finish up quickly and come back. Duplain will throw a fit if he finds out." Isolin also chuckled softly, "I'm counting on you, Derek." The carriage slowly rolled away. Isolin suddenly remembered something, covering her mouth in alarm. "Oh my, I almost forgot." Jaden quickly responded, "Yes, my lady, what were you going to say?" She looked back through the glass window. "My mother is returning next week. I forgot to mention it to Derek." He looked at her with a puzzled expression. "Does that need to be mentioned?" Isolin hesitated. "Well," she thought to herself, "my mother is a bit." Scene changes to a room where the door is thrown open. A woman in a blue dress entered. Isolin thought to herself, "It's hard to describe. She's like a god of destruction." Maria angrily slammed her hand on the desk in Duke Duplain's office. "A commoner is teaching Diala. What is the meaning of this?" Facing her anger, Duke Duplain nonchalantly cut in, "My ears are working just fine. Why don't you lower your voice?" Maria was still furious. "Now is not the time to talk about that, it's Diala, our beloved youngest daughter." As she vented, he slowly took off his glasses. Maria, you know as well as I do that I'm not fond of hiring commoners. Duke Duplain explained reluctantly. But all the prestigious magic tutors have already given up. Maria placed both hands on the table and gritted her teeth in anger. Even so, how could you bring in a mere mercenary like that? He added, it's not easy to find a good magic tutor. Besides, Derek was recommended by Isolin. Maria turned away, shielding herself with her hand. No, my lord, even so, there must be a minimum standard. She turned her head to look at the Duke and suggested. That's right. We could bring my younger brother Blame. He was busy last time, but it's different now. Diala has awakened her magic. Blame can teach her. His face was emotionless as he replied to her. Bring a garrison commander back to be a tutor. Is that how haphazardly the domain is run? Angered by his words, Maria shouted. Then what about the Ebelstein nobility? Are the nobles also run haphazardly? That is also a battlefield. She pointed angrily. Among nobles, a teacher is the most important calling card. And now, you've hired a nameless commoner. Do you want Diala to become a laughingstock when she enters high society? The door was pushed open by someone. Valerian entered and tried to placate her mother. Please calm down. You didn't come here to argue with father, did you? Maria turned her head, her voice softening as she spoke to him, but she backed away. Valerian, this matter cannot be taken lightly. Someone's voice interjected. In the end, whether that commoner is qualified to teach Diala or not, that is the issue, mother. Hearing the voice, both Maria and Valerian turned to look. When she saw who it was, she smiled and called out, Reg. He held his hands behind his back, his face stern. A commoner daring to be a magic tutor for a noble is not a normal occurrence. But if he truly has the ability, then there is nothing to worry about. Reg suggested to Duplain, Father, how about you let me test Derek? If I defeat him in a magic duel, then... He spoke. Reg, he is a true mage. He said nothing, just stared intently at him. Then Reg asked, so what about testing Dilla? Hearing this, a puzzled Valerian looked at him. Reg added, if Derek is a good teacher, then Della must have made significant progress. I will test Della to check her abilities. After hearing his son's words, he just remained silent and said nothing more. After Reg walked out, Valerian hurriedly chased after him. Reg. When he stopped, Valerian angrily questioned him. What are you thinking? A magic duel. Reg gently reminded him, Brother, do you really believe Dilla has changed? Have you forgotten what she did? Valerian explained, she's still our little sister, our own flesh and blood who needs to be protected. Hearing him say that, Reg gritted his teeth, how flesh and blood? Suddenly he shouted angrily, that flesh and blood will drag the entire family into the abyss. Isn't what she's done enough? If we let her enter high society, everything will be over. Seeing that reaction, Valerian furrowed his brow. Is that what you really think? Reg. He turned and walked away. The one who crossed the line has always been Diala. Diala only deserves to be locked up in the annex. He watched Reg's retreating back thoughtfully. Reg, with a determined look in his eyes, left Valerian behind in helplessness. Outside, a bird was perched on a tree branch, chirping cheerfully next to the window frame. Diala pushed the door open from the outside and called, Derek. He was sitting on the bed leisurely reading a book. Seeing her like that, he wondered, what's going on so early in the morning? Dilla threw a scroll onto the open book. Derek unrolled the scroll. She crossed her arms and said, if I lose this magic duel, you will be fired. His eyes looked at the paper as he replied, yes, I know. Young Master Reg is already a proficient 1-star mage, so it will certainly be difficult. Diala shouted angrily, is that all you have to say? You're going to be fired? Derek rolled up the paper in his hand. I'm a mercenary. I take a job, complete it, and get paid. He calmly added, I've already received my full payment for that. Hearing those words, Diala couldn't help but be surprised. Are you really serious? 1 week later. A group of people was entering. It was Duplain along with Melia, slowly making their way into the stands. Seeing them, Derek bowed his head in greeting, so you've arrived. Then he slowly raised his head. Seeing his expression, Duplain thought to himself, he doesn't show any sign of nervousness. He must be very confident. He sat down in his seat, thinking, to be this calm in this situation. It seems I was too quick to underestimate him. From a distance, footsteps approached. Judging by the way he was dressed, it was clear that person was Ray. He walked in with a grim aura, his fists clenched, thinking, this is no simple magic duel. Today I will crush Diala. Then Ray slowly stepped onto the platform. Diala, I will make you regret this to your very bones. On the other side, Diala, wearing a red dress, was also approaching the platform. She lifted her head and looked forward with a stoic expression, flashing back to the conversation between Dilla and him. Is that what you really want? You don't care about anything else. He spoke as he moved. You've felt it too, haven't you? Your magic is on the right track. Although you can't use 1-star magic just yet, it won't be long. Derek put on his cloak. You carry the Duplain blood after all. Why say such things now? He glanced at her. I've told you before. For the wild school, the focus is on self-study rather than learning from others. With tears welling in her eyes, she snapped back at him. So what? Why are you telling me this now? Seeing her like that, he could only remain silent. At that moment, Dila's expression was somber. I know I'm not a good student. She bit her lip hard to stop the tears from falling. But I want to continue learning magic from you. I don't want anyone else to teach me. Derek was silent for a moment. He slowly put on his gloves. I'll tell you this up front, I don't know the rules or rituals of a noble's magic duel, and I've never tried one. He glanced at Dila standing behind him, but I can teach you how to win. Do you want to win? Dila was born to sarcasm and ridicule. They always had smiles on their faces but spoke hurtful words. It seems Lady Dila has no magic, does she? Even the famous teachers gave up on her. Oh my, how could the Duplain house have someone like that? The Duplain's time is over. She does nothing but cause trouble all day. Her siblings are so talented. So why is the youngest like that? The Grand Duke must be heartbroken. It's a good thing they still have Iselin. Children are such a burden, truly a burden. It would have been better if she were never born. Remembering those words, her eyes were now filled with determination. Please, help me win. And finally, Della didn't come here as Raig's sister, nor as the youngest child of the Duplain house. Derek's eyes followed Dila's every step as she walked onto the platform. Now she stood in this arena as Derek's student.